I've just been amazed, guys. There's been a lot that I've learned in this greenhouse so far this year. With the fig trees, it really is an incredible fruit. There's so much to learn. I really wish that I could grow figs in every climate, in a multitude of climates. You would really learn quite a bit about figs and have a greater understanding of them. Not just where they're at in their native territory in more desert-like climates, places like Southern California. You could really learn a lot depending on where you're at. And everything I tell you guys is really location dependent. I try to look at the bigger picture and explain my point of views from a different location, but it's difficult. And I think this greenhouse here has certainly given me a perspective into a much warmer climate, as it does every year. However, this year we have a lot less trees in here. I've been able to focus a lot more on these trees because there's a lot less. I'm able to give more attention, right? It's just a fact. I mean, that's how things work. Same thing with your kids, guys. So I've been able to really hone in what it would be like to grow figs, I think, in a much warmer place like Southern California. I imagine a lot of you guys, I mean, I'm seeing right now, you know, about 7 or 8 leaves on some of these branches, on some of this new growth, especially on the vigorous varieties. And we're only at March 27th, which is really, really incredible. And I really attribute the success this year, obviously, to having less of the pots in here, more focus, but the focus is coming in through water. I'm able to water these a lot easier and more often, and also feed them more often. I haven't done too much feeding just yet. I'm about to do my second dose of fertilizer here. As I said, we're going to do 1 dose every week for about 6 weeks this year. Last year we did 4 doses. So we're going to be on our 2nd week coming up. Additionally, I've been able to, and you can see on the leaves here, we've talked about this, is the Dyna-Gro Protect. This is what these white circles are here, is the residue of that Dyna-Gro Protect product, which gives them some silica, but gives them the nice added bonus of potassium. You can see it also really well on this leaf. And I think the potassium really, in addition to the right level of nitrogen, is making the growth in here and also the production in here really go up, because I'm actually seeing fruits that are forming on a lot of these varieties. Like on this tree here, I have some Col de Dame Blanc forming, which you might argue is a late variety, but I actually find that this Col de Dame Blanc, I don't know if it's all Col de Dame Blancs or it's this specific tree, but it seems like Col de Dame Blanc from a particular source. Mine's from Bode. You can also get them, I think, from the USDA. They're quite slow growers, and you can see how really weak the new growth looks and how the leaves are just kind of meh. And actually, I think this tree needs a lot of root pruning. I actually would probably prefer to cut the whole tree back and do some rejuvenation pruning, really just reinvigorate this tree. But because it's such a slow grower, I'm getting fruits that are forming right in here on a lot of these branches. And across the board, it's not just me. Other people are having good success with Col de Dame Blanc, and that they're saying it's a pretty early fruiter compared to the other Col de Dame types. I don't know exactly if that's true, because if I turn around and look at my other Col de Dame Blanc right here, it's a bit further behind. It's a lot healthier. I imagine it's from a different source as well. However, actually, now that I look at it this closer, there are fruits that are forming. So there are fruits forming on Col de Dame Blanc. There are fruits that are forming on this Col de Dame Noir. The very beginning stages of it. You know, it's not like it's extremely obvious to maybe you guys, but a very up close and personal view on these buds is that you can definitely tell that some of these are forming, and I won't really know the exact dates of when these fruits are going to ripen until they ripen, but it just goes to show you that even varieties like the Col de Dames in here are starting to form fruits, which means I'm really 90 days away. I also have fruits that are forming on other varieties. I would say about half of the varieties in here, or half of the trees in here, I have about 30 trees. Half of them are forming fruits. This is Delson Wami Grand, which is definitely forming some fruits. I'm surprised to even find that trees like my Azores Dark are not yet bolting. They're not yet forming fruits. Even my Ronde de Bordeaux, which you would consider to be a very, very early variety. I do have on a very early variety some fruits in the form of Campaniere back in here. It's not growing all that well, simply because our Smith is overtaking it. I have a ton of fruits on a Violette de Bordeaux forming. It seems like a lot of the very mid-season, even on like the Daloso here, a lot of fruits are forming. The Moscatel Preto, pretty much the early to mid-season varieties in here are now fruiting. And if you remember, I turned on the heater in here, we took the cover off the top, and that was about sometime in February we started that process. A lot of these trees had really fully woken up around the 5th of March or the 10th of March. Even you could even argue the 1st. I know this Col de Dame Blanc woke up on the 1st of March. So if you fast forward to today, that's about 20 to 25 days, maybe even 15 days before some of these varieties are putting out some fruits. I think it's really more along the lines of 20 to 25 on average. I think these younger trees, like the Ronde de Bordeaux, like the really early varieties, the Ronde de Bordeaux, the Azores Dark, they're still just quite young, and it's that's probably the reason why they're behind some of these other trees, like the Col de Dame Blanc. They seem to really just be putting out a lot of growth right now, and it's obvious that you can tell that because this growth is so slow growing, that they're putting out some fruits very easily on the Col de Dame Blanc. At least that's what you could infer, right? I do think the other thing we've learned that's really quite interesting is just the amount of heat that these trees have been getting this year and how that affects the bolting. It's really, because it's only been 20 to 25 days since they've been woken up, the heat is really that big indicator, I think. You know, that heat is really making these fruits, these trees, bolt and put out their flowers, which is what the fig is. You can see over here also on this Col de Dame Blanca Negra, I'm getting some fruits that are forming. Still very, very small. You can make that out. But I think the heat is really the key here. I think that's really what's sort of happening. And we've talked a lot about heat in the past and what that really all means for this whole thing. I think a number of these varieties, if you give them enough heat, no matter where you are in the world, you give them enough heat, you give them the right sunlight, and you give them that minimal requirement of fertilizer, just the minimal amount of heat, sunlight, and fertilizer, but particularly on the heat, they start to bolt, they start to flower, and that's really what's going on in here. It's really that simple. You know, a lot of people talk about the growing degree days, and this would pretty much line up with the growing degree days, wouldn't it? Each tree needs a certain amount of heat units before they'll start to flower. And I didn't even pinch any of these trees, I want to mention. That's another thing I wanted to talk about, is because a lot of these trees have been getting such good attention. I've been feeding them so well. I've been watering them so well, is that they don't need to be pinched. they're going to form fruits on their own. Now, if I was in a really warm climate like California, I still think there's a lot of benefit to doing that, to pinching these fruits. I could have pinched, if I really wanted to, about a week ago, maybe a week and a half ago, and I could have had fruits earlier. They probably would have fruits on them more visibly than what they do. You know, but we're about a week and a half, maybe even 2 weeks behind because we're not pinching. And I was expecting fruits by the 15th of June on these very early varieties like Ronde Bordeaux and Azores Dark, but we're just not getting that this year with the lack of pinching. I could pinch these branches right now, and a variety like Ronde Bordeaux would probably produce in about 75 days from now, which would put us by June 15th. But I figure I'm gonna let these guys go because it's such, the production that's gonna come out of these is gonna be so high that I figure I should wait. Now, the other argument you could make is that it would be worth it to pinch, and the reason for that is that if you pinch off these tips now, we get the fruits to form, they're gonna put out new shoots. They're gonna put out a lot of shoots. And with enough energy and the right season length, those new shoots are then going to produce more fruits. They're gonna produce a second set of main crop, which is exactly where you guys in these really warm climates would shine. In fact, someone like me in this particular situation would probably benefit really well as well. However, I'm not really thinking about that right now. I'm thinking about other things. And I could come in here and pinch these branches and achieve that very same thing. I would get a crop by July 1st on a lot of these trees, but then fast forward in October and I would also get a second crop, a second set of main crop. You know, is that worth it for me? Is that worth it for you? It's probably more worth it for you than it is for me, because October 1st is really not the best weather conditions here. Whereas in Southern California, Texas, Arizona, it's way better. In Florida, it's way better there than it is here in October. So for me, I'm kind of just trying to stretch this, I think, ideally as far as I can get it. You know, get as much of this growth, this new growth as I can, then do the pinching and get our fruits to form. And they're already forming on their own, you know, and it's going to be interesting, I think, to see sort of how this whole thing plays out, because we're still learning, we're still observing. But I think the main takeaways here is the heat, the attention that I've been giving them, the water, the fertilizer. But the heat, I think, is that big one, and they're all just getting triggered into this. Now, one other point I want to make is that just because like a variety here like Del San Juan Migran or Col de Dame is forming fruits now, doesn't mean they're going to ripen 90 days from now. Now, it depends on the variety. Some varieties like I have over here, like the Dels Ermitons, I think is right there. Maybe even the Dels de la Senora Hyvernenka, and maybe even Black Madeira from UC Davis. Just because they form now, even the Black Madeira is fruiting right now, by the way, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But even if they form now, those varieties that I mentioned won't fruit in 90 days. It may take them 120 days. It may take them 110 days. So it's a bit tricky here to kind of figure out when exactly these things are going to ripen. But for those varieties, I would recommend getting them pinched as soon as humanly possible, because 90 days from today puts us at July 1st, which is a great date to get some fruits for just about anybody in the world. Or in the Northern Hemisphere. So yeah, that's a great date. But I'd also, you know, if I'm waiting for these varieties that take 120 days and they're forming fruits now, that's putting us at August 1st, which is just not as good. You know, so it's just one of those things I think you guys ought to think about. Yeah, the Black Madeira is just sort of waking up. It's not really done anything just yet, so can't even think about pinching it. There are some trees in here just much further behind others, and you can really tell, you know, down here at the lower level, when I sit down here, it's actually kind of cool. If I stand up, I start to sweat. you know, because all the heat down here isn't staying down here. It's rising to the top. It's getting trapped at the top of the greenhouse. So all these varieties, like some of them I have here, like De La Roca, hasn't even woken up yet. You know, there's some varieties in here that still haven't done their thing. I have, by the way, this Capra Fig here, which is getting some of this spindly growth, which is not good. So I'm trying to get it some sunlight here. Maybe in the near future I can move some of these trees out of here and give some others more attention. I think that's probably the next step, is to, you know, feed them again. I'm going to do that today. Move some of them out of here, give others more attention. But I got to be careful when I take these trees out of here, because there's a lot of weak, very lanky growth, and if it's a really windy day, that's not going to help these trees. So I need to pick the day very carefully. But you can see over here on this particular Capra Fig, this is Profici, potentially. If this were to be pollinated by some fig wasps, I would actually have some Profici that I could take off of this tree sometime 90 days from today and put them underneath my other figs, and I would be able to get myself some pollinated fruits. And that's pretty cool. You know, the question is, with these two varieties, is one of them or both of them going to put out a reliable crop of the three different crops, the Profici, the Mamey, and the Mamoni? I need all three of those. Ideally, what would have happened is that if these were more mature trees, I would have the overwintering crop that will be overwintered here in the greenhouse, that's filled with Profici, or filled with the fig wasp. They leave that overwintering crop, go into the Profici here, pollinate the Profici, then you take the Profici and you put it underneath your main crop. And also, this tree and one of these should form a main crop of its own. I forget if that's the Mamey or the Mamoni, but that would be the typical normal main crop, but it's named in Italian. So you know, that would be then the next set of wasps goes into the main crop of these Capra Figs, and the cycle continues. It just keeps going into each individual set of crop. You need 3 different crops consecutively and reliably to be able to achieve this particular process of colonizing the Blastophaga here in this greenhouse. You know, I do have some in-ground trees that are very, very young, like on the sides, that we're going to Japanese espalier. I can't even get to them. I can't even see them. I don't even know how they're doing. I would imagine that this one over here is probably growing and putting out some very lanky, weak growth, which is not good. So I want to get some things out of here. I want to clear this out a little bit. I, of course, want to keep some of this stuff in here to get more fruits, but it's just not probably going to be feasible, you know, with the amount of trees that are in here. So I want to thank you guys for watching this one. Check us out on Fig Boss, Facebook, and Instagram. I hope you guys learned something. I'm really interested in what's going to happen in here, and I'm glad to be able